I was seated behind a pillar at my sister Genevieve's wedding. Everyone pretended I wasn't family. Genevieve was marrying Jasper, my ex-fiancé, who she stole from me 2 years earlier. Then a stranger sat beside me and said, "Just follow my lead and pretend you're my date." When he stood to speak, everyone turned. My sister stopped smiling. But trust me, I'm getting ahead of myself. You need the whole story to understand the depth of the ice-cold cruelty I felt that day. Let me start from the beginning. From the moment I received that cream-colored invitation in the mail 3 months earlier. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning in April. I was living in Denver then, working as a pastry chef at a boutique bakery downtown. My apartment was small, but cozy, filled with the comforting scent of vanilla and cinnamon from my experimental baking sessions. I'd been up since 4 that morning, perfecting a new recipe for honey lavender croissants. When I finally stumbled home around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, exhausted but satisfied, I almost missed the elegant envelope wedged between utility bills and grocery store circulars. Genevieve was getting married. My older sister, the golden child, the daughter who could do no wrong in our mother Theodora's eyes. The invitation was formal, traditional, exactly what I expected from her. White embossed lettering announced her union to Jasper. Just seeing the name on the heavy cardstock made my stomach clench. Jasper. The man I had been engaged to. The man I had planned a life with, a life that included discussions about buying a house and starting a college fund for imaginary children. I should have been happy for her. Sisters are supposed to be happy for each other during milestone moments. But as I held that invitation, all I could think about was the last family dinner we'd attended together 6 months earlier, and the crushing betrayal that happened 2 years before that. 2 years ago, Genevieve had come home, crying about her own failing relationship. Jasper, bless his deceptive heart, had been so supportive to me, telling me he was helping my sister through a tough time. Turns out, he was helping her right into my life, and my bed. The discovery came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I came home early to surprise Jasper, but I was the one who got the surprise. I didn't cause a scene. I just looked at them, standing there in my living room, and the only thing I could manage to say was, "You can have him, Genevieve. He's clearly yours." I broke off the engagement that night. I didn't want the ring, the house deposit, or the drama. I walked away and kept silent, even when my mother Theodora called me dramatic for not fighting for him. Our mother had hosted Thanksgiving at her house in the suburbs. I'd brought a pumpkin cheesecake I'd spent 2 days perfecting, layers of spiced cream cheese and ginger snap crust that had turned out beautifully. Genevieve had brought a store-bought pie from a chain bakery. "Adeline, you really shouldn't have gone to so much trouble," my mother said, barely glancing at my dessert before placing it on the far corner of the buffet table. Genevieve's pie looks lovely, so classic and traditional. That was how it always went. Genevieve could show up empty-handed and receive praise for her presence alone. I could bring the moon on a silver platter and it would somehow be too much, too showy, too trying too hard. My mother constantly reminded me that my salary as a pastry chef was small and unstable, unlike Genevieve's corporate promotion track. The wedding invitation included a small note card handwritten in Genevieve's perfect, looping cursive. "Adeline, I know we haven't been as close lately, but it would mean everything to have you there. You're my only sister." I knew what it meant. It meant she needed to check a box. It meant she needed the world to see her perfect little sister, the disappointment, show up to validate her perfect life. But beneath that, I felt the familiar sting of the ultimate betrayal. She wasn't just marrying some guy, she was marrying my guy. I called her that evening. I paced my tiny apartment, running my fingers over the faded floral pattern on the armchair. It took 4 long rings before she picked up, sounding annoyed by the interruption. "Genevieve, I got your invitation." "Congratulations." "Oh, good. I was worried it might get lost in the mail." "Can you make it?" Her voice lacked any real warmth, like she was reading from a script. "Of course. I wouldn't miss it." I couldn't resist. Tell me about Jasper. How did you two meet? There was a pause, a small, pregnant silence that hung in the air, just long enough to confirm that she knew I was asking about the elephant in the room. We met through work at a pharmaceutical conference. He's a regional director at Bennett Health Solutions. Very successful, very established. Mother absolutely adores him. Of course, she did. Theodora valued stability and status above everything. My brief engagement to Jasper had brought her fleeting pride because of his job title. His subsequent engagement to Genevieve restored the family's social standing perfectly. It was about success and optics, not happiness or inheritance. I wondered if Genevieve loved him, or if she just loved how he looked on paper, the perfect accessory to her perfect life. I knew, with chilling certainty, that she had pursued him, not out of passion, but out of a need to win. To have the perfect man, the perfect job, the perfect life, and she couldn't tolerate that I, the family disappointment, had been the one to find him first. I'm really happy for you, I said, trying desperately to inject some sincerity into the lie. I failed. Thank you. She sighed, an impatient little sound. Listen, I have to run. We're meeting with the wedding planner in 20 minutes. I'll send you more details later. She hung up before I could even say goodbye. I stared at my phone, the abrupt end to our conversation feeling like a door slamming in my face. It was the same familiar feeling that had settled in my chest 2 years ago when I found them together. It wasn't quite sadness, wasn't quite anger. It was the dull ache of being perpetually secondary, the one who could be cut off, dismissed, or replaced without a second thought. I walked over to my bookshelf, pulled out the worn copy of The Joy of Cooking, and tried to focus on something tangible. Baking was my therapy. It was the one area of my life where I was unequivocally successful, where my worth was measured by skill and taste, not by my divorce record, even though I never actually made it to the marriage part. The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a blur of work and preparation. I needed this wedding to be a quick, clean entry and exit from the toxic family drama. I bought a new dress, a soft blue sheath that complemented my complexion without being too attention-grabbing. I didn't need to steal the spotlight, I just needed to survive the day. Arranging time off from the bakery was a feat in itself, much to my boss's dismay, since June was our busiest season. I spent hours planning the logistics, the 5-hour drive, the hotel reservation. Every mundane detail was a way to distract myself from the looming confrontation. I should have known something truly insulting was coming when Genevieve didn't ask me to be a bridesmaid. Logically, I knew why. I wasn't a part of her perfect narrative. But it still stung when I saw the social media posts. She had 5 bridesmaids, I learned from her perfectly curated Instagram feed. College friends, work friends, even our cousin Jessica, who she'd barely spoken to in years. But not me. The pictures were everywhere, matching robes, champagne toasts, pre-wedding spa day. It was a visual feast of enforced sisterhood and friendship, all designed to show the world how popular and loved Genevieve was. I finally worked up the courage to ask her about it during a brief, strained phone call about directions to the resort. The wedding party is already set, she explained, her voice airy, as if discussing the weather. You understand, right? These are people I see regularly. People who've been supporting Jasper and me through this wonderful journey. The words hit me like a physical blow. Supporting Jasper and me. The subtle implication was that I had not been supportive, which was true. How could I support the union of the man who cheated on me and the sister who betrayed me? I understand perfectly, I managed to say, my throat tight. I understood that I'd never be part of her inner circle. That our shared childhood, our memories, our actual bond as sisters meant nothing compared to her current social standing and the need to present a flawlessly successful image. She was ensuring that I, the inconvenient truth, would be kept far away from the emotional core of her event. My mind went back to the breakup with Jasper. When I had confronted them, Jasper, ever the smooth-talking executive, had tried to minimize his fault. It was a mistake, Adeline. Just a brief moment of weakness. It doesn't change what we have. It changes everything, I had whispered, the cold reality hitting me. You don't have the integrity for what we had. Genevieve had stood silently, letting Jasper take the lead, only offering a single, tearful plea, Adeline, please don't tell Mother. She'll never forgive me. The family had demanded I keep quiet to protect Genevieve's perfect facade. And I had done it, protecting them while my own heart was being shredded. Now, this bridesmaid snub felt like the final reward for my silence. The wedding was scheduled for a Saturday in late June at an upscale resort outside Denver. I drove there alone, the 5-hour journey filled with the kind of music that encourages contemplation and the occasional tear. My blue dress hung carefully in the back seat, a small, square gift wrapped in silver paper resting on the passenger seat. I'd spent weeks deciding what to give them, finally settling on a set of handcrafted ceramic bowls from a local artist. Something thoughtful, something unique, something that showed I cared, despite everything. I paid for everything myself. I didn't want any financial tie to my family. Since my parents' divorce 5 years ago, family events often devolved into arguments over who paid for what and who got to keep what pieces of the inheritance. I wanted nothing from them but my own freedom. The resort was stunning. Manicured lawns stretched toward mountain views, and the ceremony site overlooked a pristine lake. White chairs were arranged in perfect rows, and flowers, expensive ones, I was sure, seemed to bloom from every available surface. Genevieve had spared no expense, which meant our mother, Theodora, had spared no expense. This was the wedding she'd always dreamed of, the perfect culmination of her perfect daughter's perfect life. I arrived 2 hours early, hoping to find Genevieve and offer my help, or at least my support. I still felt a deep, ingrained compulsion to be the good sister, even to the one who had hurt me most. Instead, I found chaos at the high end, carefully orchestrated chaos of the elite. The bridal suite was filled with laughing women in matching sage green silk robes, champagne glasses in hand, while a professional photographer captured every moment of their manufactured camaraderie. I knocked softly on the open door frame. Genevieve glanced up from her makeup chair. Her eyes met mine for just a second before sliding away, back to her reflection. Adeline. You're here early. Yes. I thought maybe I could help with something. Run an errand, or just be an extra set of hands. She gave a small, brittle laugh. Everything's under control. The wedding planner has it all handled. The flowers are set, the dress is fine, and honestly, the last thing we need is an extra person cluttering up the room. She paused, her voice hardening slightly. Why don't you go find your seat? The ceremony starts soon. You don't want to get in the way of the setup. One of the bridesmaids, a blonde woman I didn't recognize, giggled and whispered something to the woman next to her. They both looked at me and smiled in that polite, closed-off way people do when they really, truly wish you'd leave. I backed out of the room, my face burning, the small, silver-wrapped gift feeling heavy and ridiculous in my hand. I shouldn't have come early. I shouldn't have assumed I'd be welcome in that inner sanctum of pre-wedding preparations. The ceremony site was still being prepared when I made my way outside. Staff members rushed around with last-minute adjustments, perfecting what was already perfect. I wandered toward the guest seating area, looking for my name card. Row after row of pristine white chairs stretched before me. The front rows were clearly reserved for immediate family, VIPs, and business connections. I half expected to find my name somewhere in the 5th or 6th row. Close enough to show I mattered, but far enough to acknowledge I wasn't part of Genevieve's daily, polished life. I found my name card in the back row. The very last row. It wasn't just the last row, though. The card, with my name Adeline printed in elegant script, was on a chair partially hidden behind a huge, decorative stone pillar that supported the ceremony arbor. From that seat, I'd have a completely blocked view of the ceremony, unable to see Genevieve's face as she said her vows to the man who was once mine. I stood there, holding that little card, and something inside me cracked. This wasn't an oversight. This was not a mistake by the wedding planner. This was deliberate. This was Genevieve's way of putting me exactly where she thought I belonged, out of sight, out of mind, barely acknowledged, the inconvenient piece of the family puzzle that she couldn't completely discard. I could have left then. I could have driven straight back to Denver, called in sick, and spent the day nursing my wounded pride with ice cream and bad television. But stubbornness, fueled by 2 years of suppressed anger, kept my feet planted. I was her sister. I had been invited. And I'd be damned if I'd give her the satisfaction of my absence and the admission that she had one. Guests began arriving around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I watched from my position behind the pillar as people found their seats, greeted each other warmly, and took photos against the picturesque mountain backdrop. I recognized some faces from family gatherings, aunts and uncles and cousins I hadn't seen in years. None of them noticed me, tucked away in my corner, my presence negated by the massive stone structure. Our mother, Theodora, arrived 20 minutes before the ceremony, resplendent in a champagne-colored gown that probably cost more than my annual bakery bonus. She was escorted to the front row by a groomsman, beaming and accepting congratulations from everyone she passed. She didn't look back. She didn't scan the crowd for her younger daughter. Why would she? I was exactly where I was supposed to be, invisible. The ceremony began at 5 o'clock exactly. Music swelled from hidden speakers, and the wedding party processed down the aisle. Each bridesmaid looked beautiful in their matching sage green dresses, carrying bouquets of white roses and eucalyptus. The groomsmen followed in sharp navy suits. Then came the ring bearer and flower girl, children I didn't recognize, probably from Jasper's extended family. Finally, Genevieve appeared on our father's arm. Even from my obstructed view, I could see she was stunning. Her dress was a masterpiece of lace and silk, her veil trailing behind her like a cloud. Our father, who I'd barely spoken to since the nasty custody battle following the divorce 5 years earlier, looked proud and distinguished in his tuxedo. I craned my neck around the pillar, trying to catch a better view of the officiant and the couple. The angle was terrible. I could see maybe 40% of the actual ceremony, mostly just the backs of people's heads and occasional glimpses of Genevieve's dress. That's when I noticed I wasn't alone in the back row. A man sat 2 chairs away from me, partially hidden by the same pillar. He was younger than most of the guests, maybe in his early 30s, wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. His dark hair was styled casually, and he had the kind of sharp, intelligent features that belonged in a magazine advertisement. But what struck me most was the expression on his face. He looked as out of place and uncomfortable as I felt. He wasn't bored, he looked deeply observant, like he was watching a play he hadn't bought a ticket for. He caught me looking and offered a small, sympathetic smile. I smiled back weakly before returning my attention to the ceremony, or what little I could see of it. The officiant spoke about love and commitment and partnership. Genevieve and Jasper exchanged vows that I couldn't quite hear from my position. They exchanged rings, kissed to enthusiastic applause, and just like that, my sister was married to my ex-fiancé. The ceremony lasted maybe 25 minutes, though it felt both longer and shorter than that. As guests began standing and moving toward the cocktail hour location, the stranger from my row approached me. Up close, he was even more striking, with intelligent gray eyes that seemed to see more than they should. That was quite a view, wasn't it? His voice was smooth and carried a hint of amusement, cutting through my tension. Spectacular, I replied dryly. I especially enjoyed the back of that gentleman's head in row 8. Very photogenic. He laughed, a genuine, warm sound that made something in my chest loosen slightly. It was the first genuine laughter I'd heard all day. I'm Silas, he said, extending a hand. And I'm guessing from your prime seating assignment that you're either someone's least favorite relative or you insulted the wedding planner. I shook his hand. His grip was firm. Adeline. And I'm the bride's sister, actually. His eyebrows rose. Surprise crossed his features, quickly followed by genuine curiosity. Her sister? And they put you back here? Apparently, I'm not part of the wedding aesthetic, I said, a bitter edge in my voice. The truth is, the groom was my fiancé 2 years ago. I'm the inconvenient reminder of what a spectacular mess this all started as. They've gone to great lengths to make me invisible. Silas studied me for a long moment, and I had the distinct impression he was seeing far more than just my bitter humor. He was processing the entire toxic dynamic in real time. "Well, that's their loss," he said finally. "The cocktail hour is about to start, and I have a feeling navigating that crowd is going to be just as awkward as the ceremony. What do you say we face it together?" "You don't have to pity me, Silas. I'm fine." "It's not pity. It's strategic alliance." He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I'm here as a +1 for my business associate, who couldn't make it. Which means I know exactly 3 people at this wedding, and 2 of them are the couple who just got married and won't remember I exist. I've never been to a wedding where I didn't know the couple." He gestured vaguely toward the crowd, which was already starting to thin out. "I could really use a buffer. So, really, Adeline, you'd be doing me a favor." There was something honest in his offer, something that spoke to a shared status as an outsider, that made me want to say yes despite my wounded pride. Before I could respond, he extended his arm in an old-fashioned gesture. "Shall we?" I hesitated for only a moment, taking a deep breath and letting go of my own isolation, before linking my arm through his. Together, we walked toward the cocktail hour. My spine straightened. His presence was an immediate shield, a sudden boost of unexpected confidence. For the first time since arriving at this resort, I didn't feel completely alone. I felt seen, at least by one person. The cocktail hour was held in a spacious pavilion overlooking the lake. Round tables were scattered throughout, each topped with more flowers and candles. A bar dominated one wall, and servers circulated with trays of appetizers that looked almost too beautiful to eat. Almost. As a pastry chef, I had strong feelings about food as art, and whoever had catered this event knew their craft. Silas stayed close as we navigated the crowd. People clustered in small groups, conversations buzzing with the pleasant energy that comes with free-flowing champagne and the forced happiness of a wedding celebration. Several guests glanced our way with curiosity, probably wondering who the handsome stranger was, and why he'd attached himself to the bride's invisible, heartbroken sister. We found a quiet table near the edge of the pavilion. Silas returned from the bar with 2 glasses of white wine and a plate of appetizers he'd somehow convinced a server to compile for us. "So," he said, settling into the chair across from me. "Tell me about your sister. What's she like when she's not starring in the wedding of the century? I need the real story, not the Instagram version." I took a long sip of wine, the cool liquid giving me a moment to consider how to answer honestly without sounding like a completely bitter mess. "Genevieve is perfect," I started. "Or at least, she's always worked very hard to appear perfect. Good grades, good salary track, good relationships. She's the daughter every parent dreams of having. She's everything Theodora ever wanted. And you're not." He stated it not as a question, but as a conclusion he'd already reached. "No. I'm the daughter who became a pastry chef instead of a lawyer or a consultant. Who lives in a small apartment instead of a house with a mortgage. Who dated someone decent and then lost him to her sister. I'm the disappointment. The one who didn't follow the script. The one who had the nerve to break off an engagement because of cheating, which just meant more drama for the family." Silas selected a crab cake from the plate and considered my words, not with judgment, but with an almost academic interest. "Being a pastry chef sounds creative and challenging," he countered. "It takes incredible precision and artistry. Not everyone can master that craft. Try telling my mother that. She still introduces me as Adeline, who works with food. Like I'm flipping burgers at a fast food chain, not running a commercial kitchen. She never once believed I could make a serious living from it. The inheritance is going to Genevieve, you can bet on that. Family dynamics can be complicated. Especially when the expectations are high, he said gently. That's a diplomatic way of saying my family is toxic. I grabbed a stuffed mushroom, suddenly ravenous. I'd been too nervous to eat all day. What about you? What do you do that landed you an invitation to this event? I work in renewable energy consulting. My company helps businesses transition to sustainable practices. It's boring technical stuff that makes people's eyes glaze over at parties. That doesn't sound boring at all. It sounds important. It sounds like work that matters for the future, I said, genuinely impressed. Thanks. Most people just want to know if I can get them a deal on solar panels. He smiled, but there was something guarded in his expression. I was supposed to be here with my colleague, who actually knows the groom through some business connection, but he came down with pneumonia last week, and I got volunteered. So, yes, we're both wedding crashers in our own way. Survivors of inadequate seating arrangements, at least. We talked through the cocktail hour, and I found myself relaxing despite the circumstances. Silas was easy to talk to, asking questions that showed genuine interest rather than polite small talk. He wanted to know about my favorite desserts to make, about the challenges of working in a professional kitchen, about why I'd chosen pastry over other culinary paths. I asked him about his work, about the satisfaction of helping companies reduce their environmental impact, about the frustrations of dealing with clients who wanted change but weren't willing to do the hard work to achieve it. He spoke passionately about creating systems that could sustain future generations, and I found myself captivated by his enthusiasm. You really believe in what you do, I observed. Is that so surprising? Most people at my sister's wedding seem more interested in appearing successful than actually being passionate about anything. It's all about the facade. Silas's expression shifted, something calculating entering his eyes. You notice a lot for someone who is sitting behind a pillar. When you're invisible, you learn to watch people, I repeated the mantra I'd learned long ago. It's amazing what you see when no one knows you're looking. A server approached to announce that dinner was being served in the main ballroom. Guests began flowing toward the entrance, and Silas stood, offering his hand. Ready to see if your seating assignment for dinner is any better? It wasn't. The reception hall was gorgeous, decorated with what must have been thousands of dollars worth of flowers and lighting. Long tables were arranged in a U-shape, with the head table elevated slightly on a platform where Genevieve and Jasper would sit with their wedding party. Place cards directed guests to their assigned seats. I found my name, Adeline, at a table in the far corner, positioned so that I'd need to crane my neck awkwardly to see the head table. The chairs around me were mostly empty, suggesting I'd been placed with the overflow guests, the people who had to be invited but didn't quite fit anywhere else. Silas appeared at my elbow, his own place card in hand. He looked at my table and then at his own card. Interesting. I'm at the opposite end of the room, almost like someone wanted to make sure the unimportant guests were spread out so we wouldn't cluster and make the seating chart look unbalanced. This is ridiculous, I muttered, frustration finally breaking through my careful composure. I'm her sister, her only sibling, and she's treating me like I'm some distant acquaintance she felt obligated to invite. Not to mention, she's marrying my ex-fiancé, and she's trying to erase me from the entire narrative. You know what? Screw the seating chart. Silas's voice was low and firm. He plucked my place card from the table and pocketed it, along with his own. Come on. What are you doing? Improvising. Just follow my lead and pretend you're my date. Before I could protest, he guided me toward a table much closer to the head table, one clearly designated for important guests, probably Jasper's highest-ranking associates. He pulled out a chair for me, his hand warm on my back as I sat, and then settled into the seat beside me with the casual confidence of someone who belonged exactly where he was. Silas, we can't just. We can. And we did. If anyone asks, there was a mix-up with the seating assignments and we're fixing it ourselves. Trust me. The table filled quickly with guests who seemed to know each other well. They were Jasper's business associates, I gathered from their conversation. People from the pharmaceutical industry who spoke in acronyms and trade terms I didn't understand. They greeted Silas with familiarity, calling him by name, and he responded with an easy confidence that suggested he knew exactly who they were. A woman named Coraline, who introduced herself as the Vice President of Operations at Bennett Health Solutions, smiled warmly at me. "And you must be Silas's girlfriend. He's been keeping you a secret." I opened my mouth to correct her, but Silas smoothly interjected. "Adeline prefers to stay out of the corporate spotlight. She's not one for these events usually, but she made an exception for this wedding." "How sweet. And how do you know the bride and groom?" Silas smiled easily. "Adeline is Genevieve's sister, actually." Coraline's eyebrows lifted in genuine surprise. "Oh. I had no idea Genevieve had a sister. She never mentioned it during any of our meetings about the wedding arrangements." Her smile faltered slightly as if realizing how revealing that sounded. "I mean, I'm sure it just never came up in conversation." "I'm sure," I replied, keeping my voice neutral, even as the comment stung deeper than anything else that day. Genevieve had worked closely enough with Jasper's colleagues to plan aspects of this wedding, and she'd never once mentioned having a sister. The lawyer who handled our father's estate had less knowledge of our family than this woman. Dinner was served in courses, each plate more elaborate than the last. Seared scallops gave way to a fresh salad, then a choice of beef tenderloin or herb-crusted salmon. The food was exceptional, but I barely tasted it. I was too aware of Silas beside me, of the way he played his role as my date with convincing ease. His hand occasionally touched my shoulder or back in small, casual, but intentional gestures. He included me in conversations, deferred to my opinions, and made me feel visible in a way I hadn't felt since arriving at this wedding. Between courses, Jasper's father stood to give a speech. He talked about his son's accomplishments, about how proud he was to welcome Genevieve into their family, about the bright future ahead of the young couple. He mentioned how Genevieve had brought joy and sophistication into Jasper's life, how she was exactly the kind of woman he'd always hoped his son would marry. My mother, Theodora, stood next. Her speech was shorter but no less effusive. She spoke about Genevieve's childhood, about her daughter's determination and grace, about how she'd always known Genevieve would achieve great things and marry well. She talked about the wedding planning process, about mother-daughter shopping trips and cake tastings and all the precious moments they'd shared. She didn't mention me once. Not even in passing. Not even to acknowledge that Genevieve had a sibling. It was as if I'd been edited out of the family history entirely, a forgotten note in the margin. Theodora spoke about Genevieve's ambition and drive, the qualities she valued, while I sat there, a ghost at the feast, present but unseen. I felt Silas's hand find mine under the table, his fingers intertwining with mine in a gesture of absolute, silent support. I squeezed back, grateful for the anchor. Then came the best man's speech, full of jokes about Jasper's bachelor days and heartfelt sentiments about finding true love. The maid of honor followed with stories about Genevieve's perfectionism and her romantic nature, about how she'd always dreamed of a fairy tale wedding. I waited. I waited for someone, anyone, to mention me, to acknowledge my existence in even the most minimal way. But speech after speech passed, and my name never came up. Dessert was served, an elaborate tiered creation of chocolate and raspberry that looked impressive but, to my professional palate, lacked the depth of flavor it should have had. The ganache was too sweet, the cake layers too dry. As a professional, I couldn't help but critique it, and Silas noticed my focused expression. "Not up to your standards," he murmured. "It's beautiful, but beauty isn't everything. The execution is off. The chocolate is masking the raspberry instead of complementing it, and the texture is too dense. Could you do better?" In my sleep. The words came out more confident than I felt, but they were true. I might be the family disappointment in every other area, but in the kitchen, I knew my worth. "I believe you," Silas said simply. After dessert, the reception transitioned into the dancing portion of the evening. Genevieve and Jasper took the floor for their first dance, swirling together under perfect lighting. They looked like something from a magazine, the perfect couple having their perfect moment. My father cut in for the father-daughter dance, and I watched the two of them move together, remembering the times he'd spun me around our living room when I was small, before the divorce, before the custody hearings, before everything fell apart. Silas stood and offered his hand. "Dance with me. You don't have to keep playing the attentive date." "I'm fine," I said, though my voice was shaky. "I know I don't have to. I want to. Besides, I'm a terrible dancer and I need someone to step on who won't sue me." I let him lead me onto the dance floor. He wasn't terrible at all. He was quite good, actually, leading with confidence while keeping a respectful distance. We swayed to the music, and I found myself relaxing into the rhythm, into the moment. "Thank you," I said quietly. "For tonight. For sitting with me. For the whole fake date thing. You didn't have to do any of this. Maybe I wanted to. You're interesting, Adeline. More interesting than anyone else at this wedding. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're talented and underappreciated. I know you see through the superficial nonsense that most people accept without question. I know you're hurt, but you're trying not to show it, and that takes strength." His words hit something deep inside me, a place I'd been protecting all evening. My eyes burned with unshed tears, and I blinked rapidly, refusing to cry at my sister's wedding. The song ended and transitioned into something more upbeat. Other couples joined the dance floor, and Silas guided us to the edge, away from the crowd. "I need some air," I admitted. "Let's go outside." We slipped out of the ballroom onto a terrace that overlooked the gardens. The evening air was cool and welcome after the warmth of the crowded reception. Fairy lights twinkled in the trees, creating a magical atmosphere that felt at odds with the turmoil inside me. "I shouldn't have come," I said, leaning against the terrace railing. I knew it would be like this, but some part of me hoped it would be different. That maybe Genevieve would remember we're sisters. That maybe she'd want me here for real and not just to check a box on her obligation list. Silas stood beside me, his shoulder touching mine. "Family can be the most complicated relationship we have," he said softly. "We're bound to them by blood, but that doesn't guarantee love or respect or even basic consideration. They used you as a stepping stone and now they're trying to hide the evidence." "You sound like you're speaking from experience." "My father and I haven't spoken in 3 years. He had very specific plans for my life, for me to join his law firm and take over. When I chose renewable energy, he made it clear I was no longer the son he wanted. So yes, I understand what it feels like to be the disappointment. I learned that the people who are supposed to love us unconditionally are still people with their own limitations and prejudices and failures. I'm sorry. That must have been painful." It was. But I learned something important from it. Sometimes the family we choose matters more than the family we're born into. Is that what tonight is? You choosing to be kind to a stranger? Maybe it started that way. But you're not a stranger anymore, Adeline. And this isn't just kindness. I think you're fascinating. Before I could respond, the terrace doors opened and a group of guests spilled out. The moment broke, and Silas stepped back slightly. "We should probably go back inside. I think they're about to cut the cake." The cake-cutting ceremony was everything I expected: more photos, more speeches, more perfect moments carefully choreographed for maximum impact. As servers distributed slices of the wedding cake, I noticed my mother, Theodora, making her way through the crowd. When her gaze finally landed on me, surprise flickered across her features, quickly followed by that familiar, tight disapproval. She approached our table. "Adeline, I didn't expect to see you sitting here." This table was reserved for Jasper's business associates. "There was a seating mix-up," Silas said smoothly, before I could respond. "I'm Silas, one of Gregory's renewable energy consultants. Adeline and I are here together." Theodora's gaze swept over Silas, taking in his expensive suit and confident demeanor. I could see her recalculating, reassessing my presence based on the caliber of my companion. I see. Well, it's lovely to meet you, Silas. I'm Theodora, Genevieve's mother. She emphasized Genevieve's name. I wasn't aware Adeline was seeing anyone. We've been keeping things quiet, Silas replied, his hand finding mine on the table. Adeline is quite private about her personal life. Yes, she is. Well, it's lovely that she's found someone so established. Jasper is exactly the kind of man I always hoped Genevieve would marry. Successful, established, from a good family. It's everything a mother could want for her daughter. The unspoken comparison hung in the air, unlike you, Adeline, who works in a bakery and lives alone. Silas's grip on my hand tightened slightly. Adeline was just telling me about her work as a pastry chef. It sounds incredibly demanding. Not everyone has the talent or discipline to succeed in that field. Theodora's expression flickered with annoyance at having her implied criticism deflected. Yes. Well, we all have our different paths. She swept away. Later, as Genevieve and Jasper finally reached our table, the tension was palpable. Genevieve's smile froze when Silas smoothly confirmed our dating status, emphasizing his arm around my waist. How nice, Genevieve said, her tone suggesting she found it more surprising than wonderful. The evening ended with the sparkler send-off. Silas and I lingered on the steps. The next morning, we met for breakfast. Over waffles, we talked more freely. You light up when you talk about baking, Silas observed. It's obvious you love what you do. I do. It's the one area of my life where I feel completely confident. No second guessing. I know I'm good at what I do. Then why do you let your family make you feel otherwise? Because some part of me still wants their approval, even though I know I'll never get it. Not the way Genevieve gets it. Silas reached across the table, his hand covering mine. For what it's worth, I think you're extraordinary, and I don't say that lightly. After breakfast, as we were preparing to leave, Silas turned serious. Last night, watching how your family treated you, seeing how they've made you feel small and unimportant, it made me angry. Not just sympathetic, but genuinely angry on your behalf. What if there was a way to change the narrative, to make them see you differently, to give you back some of the power they've been taking from you all these years? I studied his face. What do you mean? I mean, what if we continued this, not fake dating, but real dating? And along the way, we showed your family that you're not the disappointment they've painted you as? Genevieve just married a pharmaceutical executive, right? Well, I happen to be someone her new husband's company needs. Someone who could make things very interesting for them. A chill ran through me. What are you saying exactly? I'm saying that Jasper's company, Bennett Health Solutions, has been in talks with my firm about a major sustainability overhaul. It's a multi-million-dollar project that would significantly improve their public image. I'm one of the lead consultants on the proposal. This isn't about sabotage, Adeline. It's about visibility. About making sure you're present and acknowledged at future family events. About them realizing that dismissing you means potentially damaging relationships that matter to Jasper's career. It's about you finally getting the respect you deserve. It was manipulative logic, but it was seductive. How many years had I spent being invisible? The thought of Genevieve being forced to acknowledge me, to include me, to treat me like I mattered, it was intoxicating. This feels manipulative, I said slowly. Is it more manipulative than seating you behind a pillar at your own sister's wedding? Than letting your cheating ex-fiancé marry your sister? Than your mother pretending you don't exist in her speeches? Sometimes the people who hurt us need to be shown consequences. Not cruelty, just consequences. I took a deep breath, the taste of 2 years of bitterness suddenly fresh in my mouth. I had to choose, walk away and keep the moral high ground, or take a seat at the table and demand the respect I was owed. If you're still listening, please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 below. It lets me know that you are amazing and that you're with me on this journey. Your help is a huge encouragement and truly cheers me on. Comment the number 1 so I can see you, and now, listen to the rest of my story. I didn't answer Silas right away. I told him I needed time to process what he'd suggested, even though I already knew the answer. The truth was, the prospect of turning the tables on my sister and mother, not through malice, but through sheer professional competence and Silas's strategic leverage, was too appealing to ignore. "Take all the time you need," he said, kissing me goodbye. "But Adeline, whether you agree to any of this or not, I meant what I said about wanting to see you again. That part is real." We exchanged numbers, and I drove back to Denver with my thoughts in turmoil. The next week passed in a blur of work and confusion. Silas texted me daily. Casual messages about his day at his firm, gradually building into longer conversations. We talked about everything and nothing, books we'd read, places we wanted to travel, his commitment to his career track over his father's old money inheritance plans. He never pushed about his proposition. He just talked to me like I was someone worth knowing. On Friday, he called. "I have a business dinner next Thursday in Denver. A potential client I'm trying to woo. Would you want to join me? Fair warning, it might be boring corporate talk, but I'd love your company. Are you sure? I don't know anything about renewable energy consulting. That's exactly why I want you there. You'll keep me honest. Keep the conversation from disappearing completely into jargon. Plus, the restaurant is supposed to have an incredible pastry chef. I thought you might enjoy critiquing their desserts." I laughed despite myself. "You're bribing me with professional reconnaissance. Is it working?" "Yes." "What's the dress code?" Thursday arrived faster than I expected. I left work early to prepare, changing into a black dress that was elegant without being flashy. Silas picked me up at 7, looking devastatingly handsome in a dark suit. The restaurant was upscale, the kind of place where the menu doesn't list prices and the wine list requires a sommelier to navigate. Silas's client was already there, a middle-aged woman named Coraline. I recognized her immediately. She was the vice president of operations who had been at our VIP table at the wedding, the one who was shocked Genevieve had never mentioned me. "Adeline. What a lovely surprise. I didn't realize you and Silas were still together." "Still together and going strong," Silas said smoothly, his hand warm on my back as he guided me to my seat. "Adeline has been very patient with my crazy work schedule." Coraline kept pulling me into the conversation, asking about my work, expressing genuine interest in the bakery where I worked. "That sounds fascinating. I have such respect for people who work with their hands, who create tangible things. My job is all spreadsheets and corporate salary discussions. Sometimes I miss making something real." The dinner progressed pleasantly, and when dessert arrived, a deconstructed lemon tart with lavender cream, I couldn't help offering my professional opinion. "The components are technically excellent, but they're fighting each other rather than creating harmony. The lavender is too strong, overwhelming the lemon instead of complementing it." Coraline leaned forward with interest. "Could you fix it? If you were making this, what would you change?" I found myself explaining the balance of flavors, the importance of letting each element shine without dominating. Silas watched me with something like pride, and Coraline listened intently. "You know, we're planning a major corporate event in August," Coraline said as coffee was served. "A celebration for the successful completion of our sustainability project, assuming Silas's team delivers everything they've promised, of course." She smiled at him. "We haven't settled on a caterer yet. Would your bakery be interested in handling the desserts?" I blinked, caught off guard. "We're a small operation. I'm not sure we'd have the capacity for a large corporate event." "Let me rephrase," Coraline continued. "Would you personally be interested in creating desserts for the event?" We could work around your schedule, and I'm authorized to offer very competitive compensation. We need someone with a clear vision. Silas squeezed my hand under the table. Elizabeth's work is exceptional, he said, using the name he had used for me at the wedding. You'd be lucky to have her. I'd need to talk to my boss, make sure it wouldn't conflict with bakery commitments, but yes, I'd be interested in discussing it further. Coraline smiled warmly. Excellent. I'll have my assistant reach out to you next week with details. And Silas, excellent choice in girlfriend. She's delightful. After dinner, Silas drove me home. I was quiet, my mind racing. Did you plan that? The dessert conversation, Coraline offering me that job? I didn't plan anything. I told Coraline we were having dinner and I mentioned you were a pastry chef. The rest was all her genuine interest and your talent speaking for itself. But you knew she might offer me something. I hoped she might see what I see, he admitted. That you're incredibly skilled at what you do and deserve opportunities to showcase that talent. Is that so wrong? I studied his face in the dim light. I can't tell if you're genuinely trying to help me or if this is all part of some elaborate revenge plot against Jasper's firm. Can't it be both? I care about you, Adeline. That's real. But I also think the people who've dismissed you should be forced to reckon with your worth. Not through sabotage or cruelty, just through reality. Through them having to acknowledge your talent and value because it affects things they care about. He reached over, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. For what it's worth, I'm falling for you. That complicates things, too, but I'm not sorry about it. I'm falling for you, too, I admitted. The following week, Coraline's assistant called with details about the corporate event. They wanted an elaborate dessert spread for 200 guests, and they were offering 3 times my usual rate. I discussed it with my boss, who was thrilled. We worked out an arrangement where I'd use the bakery kitchen during off hours, and I'd receive the bulk of the payment. Silas and I fell into a pattern over the next few weeks. Dinners, movies, long conversations that deepened our bond. We didn't talk much about Genevieve or my family, creating a bubble where that drama didn't exist. Then, 6 weeks after the wedding, Genevieve called. Adeline, hi. Sorry I haven't been in touch since the honeymoon. Things have been crazy with settling into married life. No worries. How was the trip? Incredible. Listen, I wanted to see if you were free for lunch this Saturday. I feel like we haven't really talked in forever and I want to catch up properly. I knew why she was calling. It wasn't sisterly bonding. It was business. We met at an upscale bistro near her new house. She looked tanned and relaxed. So, she said finally, tell me about Silas. You two seemed quite close at the wedding, but you never mentioned you were seeing anyone. It's relatively new. We met a few months ago through work connections. He seems very successful. Jasper's colleagues were all impressed by him. Apparently, his company is handling a massive project for Bennett Health. There it was. The real reason for this lunch. Not sisterly bonding, but fishing for information about someone who mattered to her husband's career and his ability to secure his promotion. Julian's very good at what he does, I said neutrally. And I heard you're doing the desserts for the Bennett Health event in August. That's wonderful. Jasper mentioned Coraline was very impressed with you. It's a good opportunity. Genevieve stirred her salad, her composure cracking slightly. Listen, I wanted to apologize if things felt weird at the wedding. I know the seating arrangement wasn't ideal, and I feel bad that we didn't get much time to talk. The seating arrangement put me behind a pillar, Genevieve. It wasn't just not ideal, it was humiliating. It was just another way to remind me that you stole my fiancé, and now you're trying to erase me from our shared history. That was the wedding planner's mistake. She didn't understand family dynamics. You could have mentioned having a sister to Jasper's colleagues. to anyone. But you didn't. Coraline was surprised when Silas mentioned it. She said you'd never brought it up during all your planning meetings. Genevieve's face flushed. I don't talk about my personal life at work. That doesn't mean I'm hiding you. Doesn't it, though? When was the last time you invited me to anything? When did you last call just to talk? Not because you needed something or had an obligation? Adeline, you're being dramatic. We're sisters. Of course, we have a relationship. Do we? Because from where I'm sitting, we have a biological connection and not much else. You treat me like an afterthought. Like someone you have to include out of duty, but would rather forget. And honestly, I've accepted that. What bothers me is the pretense. Genevieve set down her fork, her composure completely gone. Fine. You want honesty? I'll give you honesty. You made choices that embarrassed our mother. You chose a career path that she couldn't brag about to her friends. You refused to conform to the expectations we grew up with, and yes, that created distance between us. I'm sorry if that hurts your feelings, but it's the truth. You weren't what she needed for her social standing. Thank you for finally being honest, I said quietly. But here's some honesty back. I'm not embarrassed by my choices. I love what I do and I'm good at it. If that's not enough for you or Theodora, that's your problem, not mine. And I'm done apologizing for being myself. I stood, placing enough cash on the table to cover my meal. Thanks for lunch, Genevieve. I hope it brings you everything you're looking for. I left before she could respond, my hands shaking as I walked to my car. The conversation had been brutal but necessary. The 3 weeks leading up to the Bennett Health event passed in a flurry of preparation. I worked obsessively on the dessert menu, creating elegant individual portions that would be both beautiful and delicious: chocolate raspberry tarts with gold leaf, lemon panna cotta with edible flowers, miniature opera cakes with perfect layers. Each piece was a work of art, proof of my skill and dedication. Silas helped where he could, tasting components and offering honest feedback. Our relationship had deepened into something permanent and real. We talked about the future, about marriage and children, and building a life that honored both our ambitions. The night of the event arrived. It was being held at an elegant event space downtown, all glass walls and modern architecture. I'd spent the afternoon setting up the dessert display, arranging each piece on tiered stands with strategic lighting to highlight the artistry. I changed into a stunning emerald dress Silas had insisted on buying me, telling me I needed to look as impressive as my desserts. When Silas saw me, his expression made the effort worthwhile. You're breathtaking, he said simply. The event was already in full swing when we made our entrance. 200 guests mingled throughout the space, pharmaceutical executives, city officials, and business leaders. I spotted Jasper and Genevieve across the room, deep in conversation with a group of colleagues. My mother, Theodora, was there too, looking elegant in champagne silk. Coraline spotted us immediately and rushed over. Adeline, the desserts are stunning. Everyone is already talking about them. You've outdone yourself. Thank you. I'm glad they meet expectations. Meet them? You've exceeded them by miles. Come, I want to introduce you to some people. The next hour was surreal. Coraline pulled me from group to group, introducing me as the talented pastry chef responsible for the incredible desserts. People complimented my work, asked about my training, requested business cards. I was visible in a way I'd never been at family events, acknowledged for my actual skills rather than dismissed for my life choices. Silas stayed close, his presence both supportive and strategic. He made sure to mention our relationship to everyone we spoke with, positioning me not just as the chef, but as his partner, the woman who had chosen him. In this world that valued connections and status, being Silas's girlfriend carried weight. I watched Genevieve notice us from across the room, saw her expression shift from confusion to recognition to something that looked like discomfort. They've spotted us, Silas murmured in my ear. Ready for the final act? Before I could respond, Jasper approached with Genevieve beside him. Silas. Adeline. Good to see you both. Adeline, I've heard nothing but praise for your desserts. Very impressive work. Thank you. I'm pleased they've been well received. Genevieve stood slightly behind Jasper, her expression carefully neutral. Hi, Adeline. Everything looks beautiful. An awkward silence stretched between us. Finally, Jasper broke it. Silas, I was hoping we could discuss the final phase of the sustainability project. There are some budget considerations we need to address. The two men moved away, leaving me alone with Genevieve. You've been busy, Genevieve said finally. Landing major catering jobs, dating important consultants. Quite a change from the last time we talked. I've always been busy, Genevieve. You just never noticed. Isn't it convenient that now that it benefits your husband's business connections, suddenly my work matters? What do you want from me, Adeline? An apology? I'm sorry I didn't appreciate your career choices. I'm sorry the wedding seating was bad. I'm sorry we're not closer. Is that what you need to hear? I don't need anything from you anymore. That's what you don't understand. I'm not the little sister begging for scraps of approval. I've built a life I'm proud of with people who value me for who I actually am. People like Silas, you mean? Jasper says he's very influential in his field. Very useful to know. You think I'm using him, or that he's using me? That's the only way you can understand this, isn't it? As a transaction. Before I could continue, Silas returned with Jasper. Both men looked tense. Genevieve shot me one last unreadable look before allowing Jasper to guide her away to mingle with the board members. Then, Coraline approached the microphone set up near the dessert display. The room quieted as she began to speak about the successful sustainability project, thanking Silas's team for their excellent work. Then she pivoted. I also want to recognize someone who made tonight extra special. Adeline, could you join me up here? My heart hammered as I made my way to the front. Coraline smiled warmly. Adeline created every single dessert you've enjoyed tonight. Her artistry and skill transformed our celebration into something truly memorable. But more than that, she represents exactly the kind of innovation and dedication we're trying to foster at Bennett Health Solutions, which is why I'm pleased to announce that we'll be partnering with her for all of our major events going forward. The room erupted in applause. I stood there stunned as Coraline handed me an envelope containing the contract. My eyes found Silas in the crowd, saw his proud smile. Then I found Genevieve. She stood next to Jasper, clapping along with everyone else, but her expression was complex: surprise, discomfort, and maybe even a hint of respect she'd never shown before. My mother stood beside them, looking equally shocked. For the first time in my life, I was the center of attention in a room that included my family, and it was because of my own merit, my own skills, my own worth. I returned to Silas's side. He pulled me close, kissing my temple. How does it feel? He whispered. Like vindication. Like finally being seen. In the months that followed, everything changed. The Bennett Health partnership led to other opportunities, boosting my professional salary significantly. Silas and I built a real life together. Genevieve and I reached a cautious détente. She'd learned that dismissing me came with consequences, that she couldn't afford to be rude to the sister of the consultant her husband's promotion relied upon. Her perfect life now required my presence. She'd constructed her own cage. The revenge, if that's what it was, hadn't been about cruelty. It had been about finally, definitively proving that I mattered. And as I stand in the kitchen of the bakery I now co-own, creating art from flour and sugar and skill, I realized that the best revenge had been becoming exactly who I was meant to be, and making them all watch while I did it. Thank you so much for listening to my story today. If you enjoyed this and want to hear more about how Silas and I secured that contract, please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and let me know in the comments below. Take care, everyone. And so, the story reminds us of an essential truth: self-worth is not something others grant us, it's something we discover and claim for ourselves. Adeline's journey teaches us that even in the face of betrayal, rejection, or invisibility, resilience and authenticity can pave the way to a life of fulfillment. She didn't seek revenge through bitterness, she chose growth, excellence, and the quiet power of proving her value through action. This tale also highlights the importance of standing firm in your identity, even when the world tries to diminish it. Adeline's courage to embrace her talents and pursue her passions, despite societal expectations and family dynamics, is a testament to the strength of self-belief. It's a reminder that the best way to rise above adversity is not to fight for approval, but to live in a way that makes you proud of who you are. What about you? How do you define your worth in the face of challenges? Share your thoughts below, or simply comment good if this story resonated with you. Let's continue inspiring one another to embrace our unique paths.